All right. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bar. I'm your host, Devon Grogans. Unfortunately, co-host Tommy John is 2 days out from his show, so he's not able to make it. But we brought in a guest, somebody that I'm very excited to introduce. I've had the opportunity of speaking with back during, I think it was COVID, so it's been a minute, but none other than Stan McQuay, or McKay, excuse me. I
Oh, you
already
said it
messed
right.
that up.
McQuay was good. You were
Oh,
good.
okay. Stan
McQuay.
McQuay,
That's right.
IFBB pro bodybuilder, coach, founder of Physique Inc. Um, Man, what haven't you done? He's been in the 202 class, the 212 class, classic physique, multiple pro wins, 4 Olympia appearances. He's a husband, a father, and perfect fit for the show. So thank you so much for coming on and joining me today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me and having me on board.
Absolutely. So I really wanted to get you on this podcast because you're a husband, you're a father, you've competed during, expanding and growing your family. We really try and go us outside of the stage on this. And I think that it would be great to hear not only your story, how life through competing at the Olympia with a family, all of that. So I guess bring us up to speed, like born in Japan, right?
Correct. I was born in the military base. My father was in the Navy and my mother was Japanese. So I was born in Japan, lived there for a very short period of time. Moved to Illinois, lived there for several years. And then when my younger brother was born, we moved to Los Angeles. So since I got to Los Angeles, I've been here since 1978 and pretty much, did my entire career. I've been living my life here, raising my family here in Los
Love it.
Angeles.
True OG in the game. I'm gonna pull, well, I'll get to photos in a little bit, but what got you into competitive bodybuilding? Grow up playing sports as a kid. I see two black belts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like I just kind of fell into bodybuilding. Bodybuilding was definitely not on my radar for most of my young life and teenage life. As a matter of fact, I pretty much frowned upon it. And the only thing I knew about bodybuilding was either I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger in movies and I just thought that was he was just a character, or if I was walking in the grocery store and I would walk by the magazine rack, I would see the guys in the spandex, crazy color, tight shorts, string tank tops, and I would think I would just laugh because in my mind I was always into martial arts and I always felt that it was very, not practical to be that big. And the bigger they are, it was always I always looked at it from a fighting standpoint. So they're just too slow, too stiff, and I just never wanted to do that. So when it wasn't until fast forward till I was already in my mid 20s that I kind of just fell into bodybuilding. It kind of happened kind of by mistake. I want to say, I was at the local gym with we worked out with a pretty small group of guys, all football players, and we saw a flyer in the gym. And we had thoughts because none of us really knew what we'd never even been to a bodybuilding show. And it was a flyer for a bodybuilding show, but we thought it was like a hard body competition. Like let's say you show up to a nightclub or a bar, they pull the guys out of the audience,
Right.
take your shirt off and flex, the girls go crazy, and the winner, whatever they win, right? That's what we thought
Hmm.
it was. So I was a small guy of the group, and the girlfriend that I was with at the time, she trained at a powerhouse across town, and we were at like a little 24-hour fitness, and she says, "Yeah, you should come to my gym. There's a lot of big guys here." Because I just didn't really know what I was doing. I was already in my 20s, but we were doing the same thing every day: bench press, curls, drink beers afterwards. Um, so I went to his. There was no bodybuilders in our gym. It was just a bunch of fit guys. So when I went over to her gym and I walked in there, it was the first time I've ever been to a bodybuilder gym. And I couldn't believe I've never seen guys like this. They looked like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, cartoon characters, completely just jacked. And my jaw dropped because I really never even seen those guys really walking around much. So my girlfriend introduced me to like the top trainer at that gym. His name was Scott Marshall. He takes a look at the flyer. He goes, "Oh, well, this is not a hard body competition. This is an actual bodybuilding show." And I said, "What the heck is that?" Like, he goes, "Well, there's one coming up here in a couple weeks. Let's go to it and you can check it out." So fast forward to that show. I remember it was in Culver City. That's where they have most of these, John Lindsay shows. That was a promoter back then. And I remember walking into the auditorium, and these guys were on stage, 1,000 people in the auditorium, and these guys were wearing Speedos, you know. And I just looked at that and I just said, there's no way in hell I would ever do that. I think that was just the fruitiest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I remember sitting there just like, wow, I mean, the guys looked amazing, but there's no way I would do that. So while I was there, ESPN was filming a segment. They used to have a show back in the day called American Muscle
Yep.
on ESPN. It was a buy, no, not a buy. It was a monthly show,
Hmm.
right? Bi-monthly or monthly show. They were there filming. It's like coverage of bodybuilding shows, and they would feature, a fitness person, a bodybuilder, maybe a girl. So they were there. They're filming, and one of the promoters of that show saw me. His name was Robin Chang. Robin Chang, was one of the Olympia promoters and whatnot. Anyways, he sees me. He goes, "Hey, you have a really good look. Are you a bodybuilder?" And I said, "No, not for me." Like, why not? So that's not for me. Well, would you ever want to be on TV? Doing what? I said, I do martial arts. So how about this? You come to Venice Beach, where they have the over there. We have the gym on the boardwalk. Come there tomorrow on a Sunday morning. And maybe we can do something with you. I said, all right. I had no idea. So I literally show up there Sunday morning, and there's these two other pro bodybuilders there. I was like maybe 165 pounds, and they just said, "How about this? Can you just do some martial arts, moves on the camera? And let's see how you look." And I was in really good shape then, more like martial artists. I took my
Sure.
shirt off, I did some moves, and they're like, "Wow, you have a really good look." At that time, they were just starting another federation. It was called Musclemania. So the Musclemania Federation, which is a natural federation, they were looking for guys that would want to be interested in competing in that. And so they pitched it to me, and I really didn't know anything. I didn't know the difference of natural versus steroids. I didn't know the difference. So, they pitched it to me, and fast forward, that's kind of how I fell into it. From day one, I was competing at, a high level for natural bodybuilding. I was already on TV and all the magazines right from day one. I had sponsors, and, I just kind of got bit by the bug and just kind of got hooked because I was always very competitive. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like how I felt.
I love it. Oh, froze on me for a second. There we go. Yeah, you had a pretty quick rise. So, what was it? 2002. What, first place at the NPC USA Championship for middleweight, but then you went.
Yeah, so I started at a relatively late age, I would say, for compared to some bodybuilders. I mean, I didn't really start getting on a serious program till I was like 23, 24.
Mhm.
Um, Competed in my first several natural federation shows from 97 to 98. Uh, Turned pro in that federation, started really studying bodybuilding, and wanted to see how I stood against the NPC, IFBB guys, the guys that were non-tested. So I entered my first national level show in 1999, I think it was. I did the USA's
Okay.
naturally,
Yep.
and I think I took fourth in the middleweights, and fourth for back then,
Yeah.
99 2000s. There was only bodybuilding. There was no men's physique. There was
Yep.
no classic. And I remember the class had like 45 guys in the
I was gonna say, yeah,
middleweights,
large
large
classes.
class, and I remember seeing all the guys in my class. They were the guys in the magazines. And I was in the magazine, but I was, like natural guy. It wasn't like the muscle fitness or the flex or the muscular development. It was,
Mhm.
those are hardcore guys. And I just remember seeing these guys and being backstage and like, wow, these guys are really big. That's a big difference from the shows I was competing in. But I took fourth, and I just kind of like it. Just really that even pushed me more to the edge of being even more competitive. And I wanted to test the water, so I competed in another show naturally, and I just had decided at that point. I think I was maybe 26 that after studying anabolics for several years, I was in college, and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to try a little bit. And that next year, I think we did Winstrol and I think some Proviron, and I actually ended up winning the USA's in that year, 2000. And so I didn't turn pro because back then, even winning your class, you didn't turn pro. You had to win the
Yep.
overall
Had to
to
win the
turn
overall.
pro, which
Yep.
was a blessing actually, because if you turn pro, there was only one class, right? It was just
Yep.
open. So I won the middleweights, didn't turn pro, which was fine. I think I was only weighing 175, I think it was.
Oh,
Um,
1 second. Sorry. Wife
it's
and
okay.
kids are coming in.
All
I'll
good.
edit this out.
Yep.
What's up, guys? Oh, I didn't. Oh, sorry, I didn't lock it. It's all right. Apparently, the front door was locked, so they had to come in through the garage. I'm
Oh,
in a
okay, you got
makeshift
studio set
office
up.
right now.
Okay,
All
never couldn't even tell.
right, there we go. So started on just a couple of things. Started seeing some progress happen
Yeah.
quickly.
So I think I weighed 175 in that middleweight class, and I was just really hooked on that whole like turning pro thing, you know. So
Hmm.
I went immediately. I did nationals, and at nationals, I discovered that if you win your class, you can turn pro. So I went over there, didn't do it. I ended up taking second. Um, I really wanted to do it, so I did it again the following year. I think it was 2000. I did 2003, then I did 2004. Took second again. You know, no pro card. I was losing to very good guys. There was back then a gentleman named Jimmy Canyon, Eric Bowie. So you know, I was hooked, but I just got to the point where I was starting to outgrow that class of the one. It was a 176 class,
Hmm.
so I decided to take a full year off, maybe 2 years, and I was going to enter my next show as a light heavyweight. So I remember I trained 2 years, tried to put on as much size as I could. We weren't using many anabolics because I was still like, like I just was kind of hesitant on what I was using, but did the light heavyweight class. I remember being at nationals for this, and the light heavyweight class is a 177 to 198 class. It's like a 20 pound increment, and I was trying to stay up the skill because I wasn't even close to even breaking 198 even in my off season, you know. So I
Hmm.
remember getting on the scale. There was about 42 guys in that class, and I was standing in line, and each guy that got on there on the scale, it would say, 188, 198, 198 a quarter. It was like everyone was like right on that cusp. And then I get on the scale, and I think I weighed 182, and I was like so deflated because as a bodybuilder we get so fixed on these numbers, and I
Yep.
got on the scale and I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna get smoked. You guys were so big. But that was the first time that I really came to realize that bodybuilding is not about how much you weigh or how big you are. I always knew I had good shape, but that really proved to me. I literally was like the second smallest in that class, and I ended up turning pro. And from there on, I decided that I'm going to be a pro bodybuilder. And luckily, I was only down for maybe 2 years before the IFBB decided that they wanted to introduce a new pro class, which was the 202 class.
Whoa, too.
So I
Yep.
was basically the first generation 202.
You had a lot of first. So you were first in 202, and then I know we'll get there as we kind of go through this as we progress, but 212, and then also you were one of the first classes to go through the Classic Physique Olympia, right?
Very first show.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So a couple of questions as we lead up to this. Okay, when you went pro, where family wise, where were you at there? Was it still just you kind of by yourself? Were you married at this point? Kids, anything?
Yeah. When I had turned pro, I was still living the bachelor life
Hmm.
and just kind of, I don't know how I did it, man. Like, to be honest with you, like I was just juggling so many things, but I was just loving life at that time because I was young and I was single. So no, it was I was yeah, I was solo up until I got ready for my first pro show, which was fast forward to
9? Was that?
2009.
Okay.
At that point, I met my wife, and she was pregnant. I was getting ready for to do my pro debut, so that was difficult. She was being pregnant. I was getting ready to do my pro debut in 2009, and yeah, that's a whole nother story too. I mean, we can talk about that as well.
I would love for you to touch on that. Like, how was the dynamic going from being single the first several years of bodybuilding and really not, being able to create your own schedule? Obviously, you had school and work, things like that to work with, but now you have a whole nother person and getting ready to bring in a whole nother person. How did all of that play into your prep and your training? Like, what changed?
Yeah, you know what? It's pretty funny because when I was single, all my buddies, all my coaches that I've worked with, everyone I was work with would always say, Stan's a great bodybuilder. He has it all going for him, but he's got one thing that's his Achilles heel. And it was always girl problems. Like I literally every time when I was getting ready for those two nationals, I took second. I'll never forget. I always had like major girl problems like that final month.
Hmm.
My coach was like, "Can you just like dump the girl and wait till afterwards?" And like I never could. That was just my thing. So fast forward when I decided to make my pro debut, I was more grounded. I met, like, again, I met my wife. I met that one solid person that kind of kept me grounded. She was pregnant. I had a lot of things to look forward to. So, the going out and living that bachelor life, that ended, and it was more like she was there. She was my backbone. She was there to help me focus. So that really was probably the defining factor of why I was so successful as a pro, was that I left behind the crazy antics of being a single bachelor to, being more tied down and level headed and having that support, and just changing the whole mindset and being excited
Yeah.
to get ready to have a kid.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that also had to play a role in cortisol and just training, focus, all those things when you have somebody who is solid and is, wanting you to succeed and helping you succeed versus having, to feel like you're pulling against uh or dragging, however you want to look at it, you're pulling
Mhm.
an anchor as opposed to somebody that's helping propel you. Did you notice any of that in your preps as far as like leading up to the shows or just like the ease of prep? Did any of that play a part?
Yeah, so when I made my pro debut, I had made the decision, and my wife, we both made the decision that I was going to be full-time bodybuilder.
Okay.
When I, as an amateur, I would never, took bodybuilding so serious. It was more like it was always a hobby. I always did it for fun. I kept a day job. When I turned pro, I kept all those things. I was still in school,
Hmm.
still working full-time job, still owning a business, but I told myself I'm going to dedicate, being a pro bodybuilder. So the first several years, I would say, even though I had that all mapped out, being married, I'm sure it was very difficult for my wife, because once you decide to commit to to be a bodybuilder full time, and if you're going to do it correctly, you have to kind of be selfish. That's the only really way to be successful, at least the way I see it, to be in bodybuilding, is you kind of have to be selfish. And I told her from the beginning, there's going to be times where I'm going to be too tired to do this, or I'm going to have to put my training first and do the cardio. I can't go out and do all these things. And she understood that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie, it was the first, probably from 2009, when it's like committed to being the bodybuilder, up all the way until even probably 4 to 5 years. It was a very difficult road for both of us, because when I'm committing to that, uh chasing that, it's almost like they say with drugs, you're chasing the dragon. It's the same thing with pro bodybuilding. I was chasing the dragon. What I mean by that is, okay, I took a little bit of anabolics for this show, I'm going to take a little more. I was just so hooked on getting to the Olympia, and
Right.
being the best there was, and that I get caught up in that rat race. And it was difficult, being on anabolics and being in a relationship. It makes things very difficult. At least for
Mhm.
me, it did, and for her, it did as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's a solid point, and it's something that a lot of people don't really think about. They just start running these, um, these substances, and they don't think outside of themselves. And like you said, they're just chasing that dragon. They got the blinders on. They're not really considering who outside of them it could potentially affect. So I love that you touched on that. Fast forwarding a little bit, so baby number one, right around first pro show was on the way. You have three kids, right?
Correct.
Okay. When what point did the family begin to grow, and did you notice that it became either more difficult, or at that point now you're further along in your career and things are kind of just operating on autopilot? Did that ever kind of come up?
Well, let's fast forward to, let's say, towards the end of my career, because from 2009, and I had a very successful pro career.
Hmm.
We did this as a team, as a family, and it was very successful. Like I said, I
And
had 5 pro wins. I made 4 Olympias. But let's fast forward to 2016, 17, around that era, where, my wife, we were having struggles, because I was so hooked on just like, I, I I don't know what more I was trying to prove, but I just wanted to win,
yeah.
and taking more and more anabolic, becoming more and more selfish. And as your kids get older, they demand more, more of your time and attention.
Hmm.
And it made it very difficult for me to give that. It was causing some friction between my wife and I. and she had started to try to give me some ultimatums like, hey, you got to like pick your family, or you're going to keep, doing this bodybuilding thing. And at that time I was like, you can't tell me what to do. I gotta, this is my career.
Hmm.
I'm making money and all that good stuff. But in the end, what it came down to is my age was a factor. Taking so many anabolics, like what is this really doing to my health? And I think it was in 2000. It was just before I did the classic. It was my final year of the 212 when Flex Lewis was the champion.
Hmm.
I remember standing backstage, and I had taken seventh in the 212 the year before. I took
Yep.
seventh this year I'm talking about, but I just remember standing behind Flex Lewis and looking at him from head to toe from behind, and just looking at his calves, looking at his forearms, his legs. He was like, he was a specimen for bodybuilding. You know, he's a genetic freak. Looking at him, going, I'm never going to beat that. Just let's be real. We all
Hmm.
take the same amount of anabolics, same stuff. We eat the same foods. I've always felt I trained my ass off. I don't know if he trains any harder. I cannot beat that. I don't care how many person takes. You know, I took set. Did we cut out? We good?
Yeah, we're good now.
I took I took seventh. Maybe I could have been fifth. Maybe I could have been fourth. But am I going to be one, two, and three? When I really look at those guys, even when I, as realistic as I am, I was not beating those guys on my best day.
Right.
I just genetically for that class, I just didn't have it. So it just came to realization: what am I doing? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep taking the drugs? I'm not going to make any more money. You had a great career, and then the classic physique. The classic physique division came out, and I got a call from IFBB saying they wanted to do this new division. And I kind of saw it as like a great exit for me because, when you're a bodybuilder, it's like, how do you stop bodybuilding? It really like does a lot on your mind, like,
Yeah.
it creates a ton of insecurities. It creates a lot of body dysmorphia. And it's like, you're using anabolics and it's a drug. Like, how do you stop? I was really good. I had great coaches, good trainers to tell me, you can't stay on the stuff. You got to cycle off, get your blood work done, all that stuff. But still, like, what do you do? Like, I was so used to for 20 years having a goal,
Mhm.
being on a diet, having my whole life structured constantly. What do I do? So this classic physique came out, and when they told me what it was about, they're going to implement uh, weight categories per height. uh, at first I was really like, oh, this is not going to work because my initial weight category for my height was like smaller than when I was a middleweight. I
Right.
turned when I was doing middleweight, it was like 176 class, and then as a pro, it was 175 for classing. It didn't even make sense. I'm like, I just competed in the 212. I was like 206 pounds,
And you're 5'7", right?
five, yeah, 5'6" and a half.
Yeah.
Like 175. That doesn't even make sense. But I need an exit plan, and in my mind, I was thinking that's how I'm gonna get used to being smaller.
Hmm.
Okay. So I took the full year off, and my coach and I, Dave Kalick, rest in peace. We basically went on a keto diet for solid, well, over a year straight.
Wow.
And I burned off again. Remember, I competed in Olympia at 200, I think it weighed 205, and I needed to be 175 within a year and a half. So yeah, I melted off pure muscle because I was never fat, it's
Yeah.
never fat. So I literally burned off a ton of muscle, did the classic, had somewhat some success on that. I won two shows, qualified for two Olympias and that.
Hmm.
But just came to the realization that, okay, even at this point, what more do I have to prove? My health is more of a priority, and my kids, of course. My kids at
Yeah.
that point where my middle one was already like 7, 8 years old, and at
Hmm.
that point, they're really like looking up to you, and you showing them the ropes of how to be a young man. So that's when I decided I want to retire.
Get it. Definitely. And yeah, I mean, I think that speaks volumes. It definitely is a sport where there's never a finish line. And I hear that a lot, and I see that. And even for myself, it was, I just want to get my pro card. And then it was, well, maybe, maybe one pro show, but
Yeah,
where do you draw the line? Because it's a game. It's like playing Tetris. It's a game you can never win. You can only maybe get hope for a better score. Unless you're
yeah, yeah,
that
right.
genius
Yeah,
dude from like Russia. But
yeah. Like To that note, the one year, let's see, I retired in 2018. So in 2017, I made an agreement with my wife. I said, okay, this is going to be the year. Okay, I'll retire, because she's like on me about it. Even though I didn't want to retire, I felt I was in my prime. You're going to retire. So I
Mhm.
picked the two shows, got ready for them. I thought the prep was awesome. I thought everything was going to be the best yet. Ended up doing the one show, and I just didn't take it. It was the first classic show. I didn't do it. I think Danny Hester won. I ended up taking second. Um, was it third, second or third? I don't know what it was, but I didn't
Mhm.
win. Went and did another show, and I just didn't really do really well. And she's like, "Okay, we're done." So I said, "Okay, I guess I'll finish." But I was like, I couldn't end on that note. It was
Couldn't
like,
hang it on that. Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't do it. Like, you got to let me finish when on my terms. I said, just give me one more year, but just don't pressure me about it. Like, let's make it happen. And in that final year, I was just more relaxed. Didn't feel the pressure. I ended up winning my final show,
And that was
qualified for the
the
Olympia. Yeah,
was that the Dominican Republic?
yeah,
Okay.
Dominican Republic. So like I finished on a win. I had Olympia qualification, but I didn't use it. But just to know in my head that I could have
Yep.
went to Olympia for the fifth time and I didn't use it. I think that's I just felt so amazing to finish on top. And then they gave me a retirement ceremony at one show. They gave me the retirement ceremony at that Dominica show. Like, I've never even seen a retirement
Yeah.
ceremony at a bodybuilding show in my life. I think I know maybe one or two guys that made it, a full career out of it. Most guys just don't make it. They end up quitting because either health concerns,
Mhm.
injuries, or they just lose interest, because
Yep.
bodybuilding, is extremely hard. So I just kind of felt like, man, I felt like $1,000,000. I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead, and that's what happened. So yeah, I think the perfect storybook ending for me was that.
I love it. So with the Olympia mindset in mind, and kind of carrying that over to the house, you've been to the Olympia 4 times, qualified 5. Is there any one or maybe two mental habits from like peak week or prep that you felt made you a better partner or parent?
Mm. Well, I mean, as you know, like, because you compete too, I mean, it
Mhm.
takes like 100% dedication, motivation, discipline to, self discipline. No one's going to, make you eat all those meals. No
Yep.
one's going to make you do that hour of cardio and go to the gym. So it's like, it's just with martial arts. That's why I felt coming from martial arts and going to bodybuilding, the dieting phase and all that discipline was actually very easy for me. So
Hmm.
when it translates to that, to being more structured, to being a father, getting up at, those early hours and feeding your kids and taking them here and taking them there. It was like, it's just more structure that bodybuilding helped me adjust and adapt to. So being in a structured life is literally how we function over here.
I find that the same. It's funny because when I met my wife originally, I was the fly by the seat of the pants guy, like, hey, let's just go do this on a whim. And as I got progressively more and more into bodybuilding, things became more and more structured. And it's to your point with the family, I think it helps tremendously as far as getting kids to sports and school and just having that plan and working through that. That's definitely a takeaway that I've gotten from bodybuilding as well, that has helped on the family side. Um, as far as so this was another question that I wanted to put together. So classic physiques in general, it's rewarded on aesthetics and control. Are there any values from bodybuilding that you pass down at home? I mean, we talked about the discipline, we've talked about the structure, patience, delayed gratification. Are those all things that you kind of have instilled in your kids, maybe without incorporating the bodybuilding aspect of it, but any takeaways from like the martial arts or bodybuilding background that you've been able to implement and actually see your children utilize?
Yeah. So like what I did, like with my kids at a very young age, all three of my kids, they all had to do martial arts. And it
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily about learning how to defend yourself, learning how to fight. It's more of the discipline. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be the disciplinary parents so much like maybe your parents were or my parents were. My parents were old school, so they didn't really know
Yep.
the difference. It was basically, smack you around and if you did something wrong and yell at you and, really hardcore. Whereas, we've learned how we want to be. So I knew that I didn't want to be the parent that was going to be so strict like that. So they immediately did have to go to martial arts though. So I allowed other instructors to be that disciplinary, which was great because it did teach them a lot of respect, and all those things with being a good kid. But with bodybuilding, I'd say the one thing that I did pass down, and I wasn't super strict with this, but diet and health. I mean, eating. When we were kids, we didn't have that structure. Like no one was telling us, what healthy was because that just wasn't a thing, right? Your
Yeah.
parents let you eat whatever. We eat McDonald's, we eat cereal every morning and stuff like that. And maybe
Yeah.
back then it was a lot better, but I can tell you right now, and you probably know this, like the foods are so damn processed now, they're just really dangerous.
Yes.
So if there's one thing that, I did take from bodybuilding is, we learned so much about how to eat and the health and what's healthy. And I do that part I do pass along to them. Not that I make them eat chicken and broccoli and all those things, but they're definitely going to eat healthy. And I'm not going to really allow them to just eat crap all the time.
Yep, that's the same rule in our house. Like we have, my wife actually put it together, which I don't know, she probably found it on Pinterest or something, but both our kids are still fairly young. And so she's got a list that sits on kind of the snack area, and it's got green snacks, yellow snacks, red snacks. Green snacks are all the veggies, the fruits, the healthier things they can grab anytime. They don't have to ask whenever they're hungry, just go grab it. Yellow is things that they need to ask, they can get on occasion. So some of the crackers, those sorts of things. And then the red snacks, the candy, the this, the that, those are ones that are on occasion that
Yeah,
it's like, okay, we're having people over for dinner. Yeah, we can do this or whatever the case is.
right.
So I love that.
I like
All right,
that.
legacy. You've done a lot, and I got a couple other questions that will kind of transition away from bodybuilding or just get some of your thoughts on the current state of bodybuilding. But as far as your legacy, if your kids were to remember one training rule and one life rule from you, what do you hope that they would get?
One training rule and one life rule.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I tell you what I really try to push, and then follow along the lines of discipline is staying on point with your scheduling and not being late for things.
Hmm.
I'm a stickler for that, and following kind of a structured plan through the day. Just discipline through the day.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it, but kind of that's how we do it in this household.
I love it. Yeah. Have a plan and stick with it. Um, so we'll transition a little bit away from that, and I want to get an idea where do you feel the current state of bodybuilding is right now compared to where it was when you were competing? Just in the sense of, do you think it's headed in a great direction? Are there certain things that you see that are great now that you wish you probably could have been a part of or would have been a part of when you were competing in your area? Like I guess just comparing the two, where do you think things are at now?
Well, I'm sure, with social media, we have access to seeing opinions and videos of all kinds of things. And, like the trend right now is you see a lot of the guys comparing, the 90s bodybuilders to the bodybuilders of today. I'm sure you saw after Olympia, a lot of people were comparing pictures of, let's say, Flex Lewis and Derek Lunsford, and they'll
Yeah.
do the side by side and, they'll pick a crappy picture of Derek and they put one of, Flex's most amazing pictures and try to compare. Or you'll have Dorian Yates, and they're asking him what he thinks, and then he's going to say, what he thinks, which is probably true. And I hate to be that guy that's in my era the guys were better, but I think pictures and videos don't lie. Although we don't have the same amount of footage as we do today, we're just so overexposed with like 10,000 people posting pictures of Derek Lunsford and whatnot. So to be all fair, most of the stuff we do see, it's just a different era.
Hmm.
Is it any better? I mean, I will have to say, yes, of course, I'm biased towards the 90s, 2000 bodybuilders because, in my opinion, it was still a different era then. But it's funny if you really look at the comparisons, what is the difference? Well, guys are actually a lot bigger now. Because if you
Yeah.
really look at the guys, like let's stay with Flex Wheeler.
Hmm.
Flex Wheeler when he turned pro, he did his first couple pro shows and he only weighed 105 pounds at a 5'10", 5'11" frame.
Hmm.
Fast forward, he got up in the 235, 240 range. Still, by today's standards, I mean, you had guys like Nick Walker, who's 5'5", 275 pounds on stage. You had Derek Lunsford. I don't know what exactly would have weighed, but he looked like he weighed a good 235, 240. These guys are
Hmm.
massive. Now, what was the difference? Well, I think the problem is the evolution of bodybuilding is, it's really the judge's fault. It's not the
You
bodybuilder's
cut out
fault.
on
It's
that
the
one
judge.
part right after you said what was the difference. I missed that.
Oh, yeah. So what is the difference to me right now is it's the size of these guys, the
Hmm.
size of these guys, the evolution of the drugs, it's not just anabolics now. Now it's, peptides, now it's uh, 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 massive amounts of HGH and lots of other drugs.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
almost feel like
right.
it got to a point where we started trading aesthetics for size. And I feel like it's starting to come back towards the aesthetics. But I mean, the last several years, it seems like it's just been mass monsters and freak shows, which I mean, yeah, it sells tickets, but I'm kind of a bodybuilding purist myself, and I still lean heavily towards the aesthetic side of things. And I feel like that's an aspect that I hope they get back to over these next few years.
Yeah. So, like, what one of the major differences I do see is I feel, even though the technology and the science of the dieting is much much more advanced than it has been in the past, maybe even better supplements, but it's very dangerous now because there's so many more drugs
Hmm.
and the evolution of the drugs. And to me, it comes down to the judging. I think the judging is the ones, the judges are the ones that are causing a lot of these issues.
Right.
Because these guys are just getting bigger and bigger. Yes, I understand the evolution of bodybuilding. I mean, you're just going to get bigger. The technology and the science is more advanced. But if they're going to keep rewarding, these guys with the distended stomachs, they're tipping the scales. They're just too big. I think that's where the problem lies.
Hmm.
They try to introduce these new classes like the classic, and they introduce the 212 division to try to, make it fair for other competitors. But the open is still the main show, and it's still the freak show. But I just feel that the drugs, these guys are much harder, but they are also using a lot more side injection drugs than they were in the past, and it's not the same look.
I would agree. Um, I got a really good question from somebody that had sent one in that they wanted me to ask. It was, what are your thoughts on the new generation of science-based lifters? And I'm not talking about the straps and the weird stuff, like more
I know
so
exactly what
just
you're talking
the,
about.
the spreadsheet bodybuilders. I mean, when you were coming up, you guys didn't have access to the data that is available now. And clearly you guys made it work. So I guess what are your thoughts on, the new age science-based lifters where it's exact sets and reps and
I think there's a time and place for that. I mean, I think it's great that they're putting a lot more emphasis on the study of biomechanics, and try to do these studies of what they feel is more optimal for growth and whatnot. But let's face the facts. A lot of these guys that are these science based. I'm not saying all of them, but many of these guys. I mean, first of all, just look at them. And I'm not trying to be an asshole and be stereotypical, or prejudge these guys based on their looks. But if you've never done it yourself, okay, I have a hard time really absorbing someone trying to tell me that, well, you should be ending your sets on 6 reps, and because of the stimulation of the muscle, whatever it is, the science that they say it
mm,
is about, because it's more than that. Okay. And half the time these guys don't understand the amount of effort it actually takes, along with maybe the rep ranges and whatnot. And it's just not quite the same. It's not as simple as jotting it down on a piece of paper and saying you should be doing this and do 70% of your rep range. And then I, don't get me wrong. I've done a ton of bro science training, probably done a ton of wasted sets, probably way too many reps on things. But um, I think that if I had to go back and change some things, I really wouldn't change a thing, because I don't feel that doing by trying to make exercises more efficient or making them easier, that's not really the way to go. And I don't know. I just feel, again, I'm old school. I like to, when I do my sets, I'd like to leave it all on the table and just be completely exhausted, whether it's 6 reps or 20 reps, you know?
Right. I love it. And that takes me to my next question. And I know we're coming up on an hour. I promised you, we'd wrap it fairly soon, but in a condensed version, what was your theory behind training? Were you high intensity? Were you high volume? Did you kind of do a little bit of both? What was your your number one training principle that you kind of
Hmm.
stuck with?
Well, I'll tell you what, like when I back to that story when I went to that powerhouse gym and I hired my first trainer, probably the to this day, probably the top 3 trainers that I've ever seen. And I'm in that field. I developed into training clients, but this trainer, Scott Marshall, is still the best thing that ever happened to me because he not only taught me the discipline, but he's a pro trainer, master trainer himself. And it was hard training. It was like almost like hit training. But over the years, I've had the privilege of training with some top-notch guys, and through my entire pro career, I trained with Charles Glass, who was the godfather of bodybuilding, and basically my entire pro career, he took me under his wing and really showed me the ropes. Now, when it comes to someone like Charles, I'm not saying everything that Charles showed me was the best because specialty is angles. You know,
Hmm.
Charles' specialty is to basically take a machine and show you how to use it 2 or 3 different ways other than what it was for, by changing your angle, putting your body on there. And I think there's a time and place for that too. But I can tell you, like, when it comes to that, I definitely brought out more detail, more body parts in certain areas. But I think you need to have a combination of hard training, heavy lifting, old school barbell, dumbbell. And we started to from that a lot towards the end of our years. It was more about hitting these different angles. So I would say it has to. I'm a firm believer of progressive overload. Progressive
Yes.
overload is the theme that, to me, that works the best.
Hmm.
And then depending on where you are at in your career, whether you're getting ready for a show, yeah, maybe as we get closer, for me, what worked best for me as I got closer to show was a high volume and heavy.
Yeah. I found that worked really well for me. My off seasons, I always grew the best when I was doing higher intensity, lower rep. But then as I started progressing through prep and getting closer, it started becoming higher rep, um, still staying heavy, still trying to progress, but the higher volume seemed to do really well in keeping a rounder look on me. Um, and so I definitely can agree with that as far as what
Yeah,
worked well for
I,
me.
I think one thing too. I think one thing too that these science-based guys seem to forget, not forgetting because they're aiming these science-based theories based on normal everyday athletes, normal guys in the gym, and not aiming it toward bodybuilders.
Right. I would completely agree with that.
Oh, I think we cut out for a sec.
Little bit. There we
Yeah,
go. Got
so
you back.
I think that's one thing. And
I love it.
for
Well,
me,
we'll definitely have to get you back on. We're coming up on an hour, but I want to get you back on the podcast again with Tommy. I know he was super
hold on.
excited and then also super bummed that he couldn't make it, but we'll definitely get you back on. We'll BS a little bit more in chat. There's some more stuff that I want to ask personally, and I'm sure Tommy's got a list of questions. But if there's one thing that you could leave with people when it comes to creating any sort of balance, and I know you said at the beginning, and Tommy and I have both touched on this, to some degree, that balance or that scale has to tip to where you are going to have to, do certain things that are going to take away time from the other side. But if you were to leave people with one thing when it comes to trying to progress in bodybuilding with a family, what would that be?
Hmm. Cut out a little bit, but I think I got what you were saying. So you got to live a balance life, right? And I
Mhm.
tried doing it. It's all or nothing builder, and that just didn't work, because even though bodybuilding is hard, it's a 24-hour job. I feel, I'm
Yeah.
including when you're sleeping as part of that job. But even though even it requires a lot of time and effort, got to be realistic. And that's where a lot of people fall short, is they're not going to be so realistic, and we all are chasing that dream and want to be the best. But I think that, if you have good people in your corner, you got to keep learning to have some balance in your life. That's the only way you're going to have some longevity in this, because a lot of my friends that went all in hardcore bodybuilding, they just kind of out, didn't have friends, didn't have good relationships. They failed down in the end.
Mhm.
And a lot of this bodybuilding stuff, a toll on your mental as well,
Yeah.
and in bodybuilding, we're so concerned with how we look and the vanity and all these things, and we forget about the mental aspect of it,
Mhm.
and what it does on your mind, and it wreaks havoc on your life if you can't get a control of that, and you're just so focused on winning, or being
Yeah.
big. you
Yeah.
know it's easier for me to say that because I've been there, done that. So like that's why you asked. So I feel like you just got to stay balanced, because you know turning pro is awesome, being in Olympia is awesome, but in reality, is that really going to solve any problems for you? Is that really going to pay your bills anymore? I have to say, no, it does not.
And I'm glad you said that. And I I could spend a whole nother hour talking to you on this. So we'll definitely have to get you back on, because I want to talk about that last part about making money in bodybuilding from when you were competing to where the money lies now, because we all know unless you're winning the Olympia, it's not there. But we'll save that for another time.
Sure.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out or just kind of follow you or get more information?
Yeah, so if you want to get a hold of me, basically I own a company called Physique Inc. We've been in the industry for since 2007, and we specialize in weight loss, competition prep. You can find me at www.physiqueinc.team.com or .net. I've got 10 coaches, all IFBB pros. Like I said, we've been in the game. So if you want to get in the best shape of your life, contact me there. You can reach me on my Instagram at Stan the Man McQuay.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes, and then I'll also post it up when I go through and edit this. So make sure you guys reach out if you guys have any questions. We'll definitely look to get Stan back on the show. Stan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know, you got a family. We were talking about it before, kids doing sports and all the things. So for you to take an hour out of your day, it's much appreciated. And I look forward to having you back on soon.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks, Devin. It's 7:02. We literally got to leave in 5 minutes for baseball.
All right, well, I'll let you go. That does it for this episode of Beyond the Bar. We will catch you guys next time.
Peace.